Today on Rappler, 82% of Metro Manila and 65% of Meralco franchise areas now have power. A new tropical depression to enter the Philippines Friday. Think tank Pew Research says among Asians, Filipinos are most worried about military conflict with China. Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. Many provinces and cities in the Philippines still have no power. Energy Secretary Jericho Petilla says power will be fully restored in Metro Manila and the rest of power distributor Meralco's franchise area by 10 p.m. Friday. As of Thursday morning, Meralco says 82% of Metro Manila and 65% of its franchise areas have power. Meralco implements a 3-hour rotating brownout due to the shortage. Portions of Manila, Makati City, Quezon City, Pasay City, and Bulacan are affected. Petilla said full restoration of power for areas outside Meralco's franchise might take 2 weeks. These areas include Quezon Province, Camarines Sur, Albay, and Sorsogon. As of the latest count, Typhoon Ramasun or Glenda leaves behind at least 38 people dead. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, on Thursday says at least 10 are injured and 8 missing in the wake of Typhoon Glenda. Most of the deaths were caused by fallen trees and debris. Glenda left the Philippine Area of Responsibility Thursday afternoon. State Weather Bureau GAZA says Glenda at its peak sustained winds of up to 140 kilometers per hour near the center and gusts of up to 170 kilometers per hour. The typhoon passed through Metro Manila and the provinces of Albay, Camarines Sur, Camarines Norte, Quezon, Laguna, Rizal, Cavite, Bataan, Zambales, Bulacan, and Pampanga. The storm is already over the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. 7 of those provinces are under a state of calamity. Metro Manila and parts of Cavite showed minimal damage, while Quezon seemed to have suffered the most. NDRRMC Chief Alexander Pama says Glenda passed through the entire length of the province. As of Thursday, 99% of Quezon is without electricity. Under a state of calamity, a 60-day price freeze is imposed on prices of basic goods. It also allows the local government to tap into emergency funds. Typhoon out, but tropical depression in. As Typhoon Glenda leaves the Philippines, a new weather disturbance enters the country. State Weather Bureau GAZA says it spotted a new tropical depression 990 kilometers east of northern Mindanao. If the system develops into a storm, its international code name will be Matmo. Once it enters the Philippine Area of Responsibility, it will be called Henry. The Agriculture Department estimates Typhoon Glenda's damage to crops and fisheries may reach 2.3 billion pesos or $53.3 million. Agriculture Secretary Proceso Alcala says rice production suffered the most at 512.7 million pesos or $11.8 million. The report covered 15 provinces and 4 regions, including hardest hit areas Quezon and Bicol. And Dreamsea pegs typhoon damage to the agricultural sector amounting to over 668 million pesos in the Bicol region alone. Alcala says initial inventories show the damage will not significantly affect the country's food supply because there's a buffer stock in every region. He adds most of the affected crops are in their vegetative stage and are likely to survive. The Agriculture Department adds prices of crop commodities are likely to be stable since sellers still have their supplies of crops before the typhoon came. Alcala assures the department is ready for the next storm, which GAZA says may happen in a few days. Rappler Civic Engagement arm Move PH, in cooperation with BlogWatch's citizen advocates, is compiling a list of relief and volunteer efforts initiated by groups and individuals to help those affected by the typhoon. Please share this with your friends, families, and networks and encourage them to extend help to those in need. Do you know of an open relief operations center? Help us create this public list by visiting rplr.co/GlendaRelief. President Aquino's Communications Secretary Sonny Coloma tells critics to lighten up. This comes as most of Filipinos on social media thumbed down Aquino's call to the public to wear a yellow ribbon as a show of support. Coloma asks critics to look at this as an opportunity to unite in the middle of diverse opinions on the Disbursement Acceleration Program, or DAP. Non-supporters threatened to wear other ribbons and even a pin of the Philippine flag to show where their loyalty lies. Coloma said the president was not joking when he made the request, but it should also not be taken too seriously. Aquino made the request as his approval ratings dipped against the backdrop of the palace's controversial spending scheme. A combative president versus a defiant co-equal branch of government. A governance expert says the executive's war with the Supreme Court over a spending controversy highlights the need for checks and balances in the Philippines' democracy. Ateneo School of Government Dean Tony Lavinia says he was bothered by the president's speech Monday. He says it sounded like President Aquino was calling for the impeachment of Supreme Court justices.
Well, I was bothered by that statement because the only interpretation you can make about a third branch intervening is the extreme action of impeachment. The next day, because you said two speeches, the next day he gave a speech with the World Bank head there in the Department of Budget and Management. I thought that was a more circumspect speech.
Lavinia says everyone, the president included, can criticize the Supreme Court, but compliance is a must. He adds, giving the president the privilege to stretch the limits of the law allows him to exercise good governance.
To be sure, I mean, in governance you have to stretch the limits of the law because you have to solve problems directly. And another colleague of mine, Dean Mel Santamaria, pointed out very well that ultimately the president is responsible for this country. It's not the Supreme Court, it's not the legislature. So therefore you have to give the president wide latitude.
Right.
But you cannot never give the president unrestricted latitude, right? Because if you do that, that's a dictatorship. And who sets those boundaries? It has to be the Supreme Court. That's law. So governance is expanding those boundaries, stretching it, and law is actually telling you you've stretched it enough.
Lavinia says the dictatorial regime of former President Ferdinand Marcos is historical proof there's a need for a final arbiter that will keep the president's power in check.
This was the Marcos experience. If you can guarantee me that we will never have a Marcos again in this country, that our president will always be as good as President Aquino, that our president will always be as sincere, if you can guarantee me that, let's take away that power from a Supreme Court. But if you can't guarantee me that, then we're better off having a Supreme Court that makes mistakes, but is the final arbiter for disputes. Only for disputes. If there were no...
The Bureau of Internal Revenue, or BIR, turns its attention back to doctors after focusing on local governments. This time, the BIR hits doctors in Makati City. In an advertisement released Thursday, BIR says 1 out of 9 doctors in Makati filed income taxes, quote, less than the average public school teacher in 2012. BIR cites a certain doctor in Makati who earns a gross income of 3.7 million pesos or over $85,000 in 2012, but only declared an income tax of 2,000 pesos or just nearly $46. The ad reads, "When you don't pay your taxes, you're a burden to those who do." BIR zeroes in on self-employed and professionals, part of its Name and Shame campaign aimed at increasing tax compliance. One of the BIR's controversial ads showed a doctor riding piggyback on a teacher, which angered the Philippine Medical Association, or PMA. A word war ensued between the camps. The BIR slapped then PMA head Leo Olarte with tax evasion charges soon after. U.S.-based think tank Pew Research Center says among Asians, Filipinos are the most worried about military conflict with China. The 2014 Spring Pew Global Attitude Survey shows 93% of Filipinos fear territorial disputes between China and neighboring countries could lead to a military conflict. Filipinos are most worried about this compared to other countries in conflict with China like Japan at 85%, Vietnam at 84%, and India at 72%. The Philippines is the only country that dared to bring China to court over its South China Sea claim. It also has one of Asia's weakest militaries. Thailand's military junta gives permission to ousted Prime Minister Yingluck to leave the country for the first time since the May 22 coup. Yingluck is expected to travel to Paris next week to attend the 65th birthday party of elder brother, fugitive former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. Her request was approved because allegedly she stayed out of politics since the military seized power and kept a low profile, an army spokesperson says. But even as Yingluck travels, she must still tell Thai authorities where she is through overseas embassies. Yingluck was removed from office in a controversial court ruling shortly before the army toppled what was left of her elected government. She was among hundreds of people summoned and temporarily detained by the junta. Her brother Thaksin was ousted in an earlier coup in 2006 and fled Thailand to avoid prison for a corruption conviction. Army Chief General Prayut Chan-o-cha seized power after nearly 7 months of political street rallies and violence that left 28 people dead and paralyzed Yingluck's government. Israel and Hamas agreed to the United Nations request to stop hostilities for 5 hours on humanitarian grounds Thursday, while efforts continued to broker a longer-term truce. Hamas earlier rejected initial Egyptian efforts for a full ceasefire, saying it had not been included in the discussions, but agreed to this temporary ceasefire. The sides announced a temporary lull in fighting across the Gaza border after an Israeli strike killed 4 children on a beach in the coastal strip Wednesday. For the past 10 days, the Israeli offensive has killed 223 Palestinians, with a Gaza-based human rights group saying over 80% of the dead were civilians. Singapore's media watchdog bans a volume of the long-running ARCHIE comic series because its portrayal of same-sex marriage was against local social norms. The Media Development Authority, or MDA, says the volume ARCHIE, The Married Life Book 3, was banned March after a reader's complaint triggered a content review. The comic features the marriage of Kevin Keller, an openly gay friend of the iconic Archie Andrews character, and his African-American boyfriend Clay Walker. News of the ban first surfaced when a local comic artist blogged about it Wednesday. The comic book ban comes in the face of rising tensions between Singapore's religious conservatives and its growing gay rights lobby. Earlier Wednesday, judges of a top literary prize quit over the National Library's plans to destroy 3 children's books with homosexual themes. Nearly 400 people gathered on Sunday in protest, while local writers also condemned the move as an exercise in book burning and censorship. Sex between men is illegal in Singapore and punishable by up to 2 years in jail under a provision in the Penal Code dating back to British colonial rule. Let's now look at Rappler's Wrap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 6, can AIDS be wiped out by 2030? Gauging from trends, there's a chance, says the United Nations. Global AIDS-related deaths and new HIV infections fell by over 1/3 in a decade. It's the sharpest annual decline since the epidemic's peak in 2004 and 2005, marking a 35% drop from the 2.4 million deaths seen in both those years. New infections also fell to 2.1 million last year, down 38% compared to the 3.4 million in 2001. But with more than half of the 35 million people living with HIV unaware they're infected, this battle is far from over. And at number 8, British police arrest 660 suspected pedophiles in a 6-month operation. They include doctors, teachers, and care workers who allegedly downloaded and distributed child abuse images. The countrywide investigation identified 431 children in the care, custody, or control of the suspects, including 127 deemed at immediate risk of harm. Britain's been rocked by a series of pedophile scandals in the past 2 years, since revelations of late BBC television host Jimmy Savile being a serial sex offender. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's The Wrap. Time magazine lists Philippine actress Ann Curtis among its 50 smartest celebrities on Twitter. Curtis, who's the most followed celebrity in the Philippines with 6.67 million followers, is number 28 on the list, which includes Billboard chart toppers Usher and Ludacris. Hollywood actor Leonardo DiCaprio and pop star Justin Bieber's mother, Patty Millett, topped the list. Time says the list was based on a reading comprehension test known as Simple Measure of Gobbledygook, or SMOG. The report says SMOG measures the number of 3-syllable words used in a text to calculate the years of education required to understand it. Every story on Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel, and your vote comes down to the mood navigator in the middle of the front page. That crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories that have affected our readers and viewers the most emotionally. If you take a look at the mood navigator in the front page today, these 10 stories have gotten the most number of votes. If we look at it today, interestingly enough, we've got, you have Typhoon Glenda turning from yellow, afraid, to sad, to gray. GlendaPH leaves 38 dead, thousands in the dark, 82% sad, and you still see the yellow at afraid, that switch from yellow to gray, showing the typhoon having left. And here's the second one. After Typhoon Glenda, it's a tropical cyclone, 31% afraid. This was a story posted yesterday where there was still a 50% chance that it could turn into a typhoon, and you have 63% sad. The story for the second day in a row, third day in a row, that's gotten the most number of votes is this one. Still, on the DAP, Aquino asks supporters to wear a yellow ribbon, 25% happy, 63% angry. That red connected to the Monday speech, coloring the mood navigator for the mood of the day. Today, most people are angry. Well, that is Rappler's newscast for today, Thursday, July 17, 2014. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Maria Ressa. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.